$5 billion. That's how much our country's wealthiest universities gained just with endowments in the most recent 5-year review period. In fact, you can see the top 10 right here. Harvard ranking in the most dough with an endowment that now stands at $50.9 billion. That's an $11.7 billion increase. Again, in just 5 years, you can see that Yale's right here grew $11.3 billion to $40.7. Stanford went from $26.5 billion to $36.5 billion. Again, from 2018 to 2022. And so if you look at the totals at the bottom of your screen right there, a total of more than $172 billion in donations from 2018 to $237 billion in 2020. These schools are all recipients also of federal funds from you, the American taxpayer, and at least 5 actually accepted pandemic bailouts during this same time period. Joining us right now to break down the numbers is founder and CEO of OpenTheBooks.com, Adam Andrzejewski. Those numbers, I tell you what, your auditors looked at also U.S. taxpayer subsidies, some tax breaks they received, federal payments. They also received $45 billion on top of that since 2018 as well. So break down some of these numbers for us. How much money did American taxpayers shell out to these universities?
Well, Jan, who knew that the Ivy League and other elite wealthy universities were taxing you? So look, it's $33 billion in the 5-year period to 10 of these elite schools, the Ivy League plus Stanford and Northwestern. That number on federal contracts and grants at $33 billion exceeded the amount that they collected on undergraduate student tuition. And on top of that, you got $12 billion that they effectively received because they don't have to pay taxes on their massive gains on their endowments. And so look, the Ivy League schools since 2017, they've got to pay 1.4% on their gains, where if you do well in America, you pay a top rate of 20% on your capital gains.
I see a lot of, exactly, and I see a lot of grants listed there, and you say many of these were frivolous grants from federal agencies. So what are some examples of that?
So you got $2 million going to Stanford to study high college kids and the retail marijuana environment. You got $2 million going to the University of Pennsylvania to preserve minority history in northern Iraq. You got $3 million of U.S. taxpayer money going to Stanford to study the sex hormone effects on transgender adolescents. You got $4 million going to Cornell to hire minoritized, their words, faculty in the sciences. I got a good idea to save $4 million. Stop discriminating and hire on merit.
And you said that these elite universities clearly are more federal contractors than educators today. Talk about that.
So the $33 billion in these 10 elite wealthy schools on federal contracts and grants, that number exceeded the amount that they collected on undergraduate student tuition. So today, Jan, these elite universities, they are more federal contractor than they are educator. And we actually unearthed their strategy. They're stuffing their endowments with billions of dollars in private sector donations. Meanwhile, they're offloading all of their research on the backs of the American taxpayer. Tens of billions of dollars a year in research grants from the American taxpayer, where they create things and then they profit further through the intellectual property created that the American taxpayer paid for.
And Congresswoman and Harvard alumna Elise Stefanik said this. She said it's abhorrent that Harvard and universities across America are enabling horrific anti-Semitism to run rampant on their campuses. U.S. taxpayer dollars should be prohibited from funding any institution that promotes anti-Semitism or anti-Israel bigotry, and House Republicans will hold these extremist institutions accountable for failing their students. And you are calling on Congress to revisit the definition of an educational charity because these institutions, as you have said, have gamed the tax code for institutional enrichment. So how do we fix this?
Well, 100%, these universities need to lighten the load on the American taxpayer. They need to start paying their own way. And regular Americans are asking the question, how can taxpayer funds, where discrimination and bigotry and anti-Semitism has been incubated at these universities, why are our tax dollars going into this? Public funding and discrimination, those two together, that cannot be tolerated.
Founder and CEO of OpenTheBooks.com, Adam Andrzejewski. Great seeing you this morning. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Jan.